Hi, my name is Natalie Nixon. I am a creativity strategist and the president of Figure Eight Thinking. I'm also the author of The Creativity Leap, and I'm really excited to be talking today to Adrienne Kenton, who is a writer and a creative producer and a friend. And we're both from Philly. Adrienne now lives in Los Angeles, and it's because of Adrienne that I was able to be connected to Melissa from Republique Restaurant, who was one of the people I interviewed for the book. So Adrienne, so happy to see you. How are you doing?
I'm so good. And I loved this book. It was just such a pleasure to read it. And I just kept taking notes, and I have a whole bunch of quotes that I just are inspiring, many of which are from you.
That is high praise. Thank you.
It was such a joy to read this book, and also just to have somebody actually capture in language what my lived experience has been, but I didn't have the words for.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And the purpose of these conversations is really I would love to hear other people's stories about creativity leaps that they've taken, how wonder and how rigor shows up in their life and in their work. So my first question to you is, what's an example of a creativity leap you've made in your life and your work?
Thank you. So actually, the main creativity leap that I made was over 20 years ago. I had been studying international relations, thinking I was going to become an international lawyer. And while I was studying at Georgetown University, I was taking a course called Problem of God. And it was in that course that I found my calling, which was to use storytelling to make a difference in the world. And it was so, I had thought that the way to make a difference was to go into law or do I was thinking I was going to do policy or something, maybe go into the foreign service or some form of that service. But I was in this Jesuit course, and we were talking about God and the nature of God. And it was in that moment that I had the realization that everything is story, everything is narrative. And the way to actually make a difference for people and to make the kind of difference that I wanted to make in the world was to actually shift the narratives that we tell ourselves, that we tell culturally, that we tell community. Everything is story. And I had that realization in that course. So that was really the first moment. And then I ended up returning to Philadelphia, and I started interning with filmmakers. And it was from there in my 20s that I started self-taught, learning a little bit about filmmaking. And that set me on my path to where I am today. But it really was a function of being in that Problem of God course at Georgetown.
That's so interesting. And I wonder, we're in May 2020. We are several months into shifting to a new reality because of the COVID-19 pandemic. How are you observing that our narratives are shifting? Is this kind of this external prompt to either maybe kind of reflect on our narratives and our stories, to create new ones? What are your thoughts about that?
That's a great question. Thank you. Everything, just listening to how people are reacting to the pandemic. I'm a mom, I have children. I'm homeschooling in conjunction with LAUSD. And as I look on social media and I look at how parents and moms and dads, working parents, are talking about this experience of being home with their children and navigating the balance between work and life, it's been really interesting to hear how people are communicating about having their children at home. Oftentimes the narrative is, oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed. Oh my gosh, my kids, blah, blah, blah. And I actually don't have that experience. I have experience of, oh my gosh, I get to be home with my kids. I get to be a part of what they're learning. I get to really observe. I have teenagers, which is another shift in the cultural narrative. Oftentimes people talk about teenagers as like, oh, you're a teenager, you've got teenagers. Good luck to you. Oh my gosh. I actually don't have that experience. I have the experience of when my children are standing up for themselves, I get to revel in the wonder of seeing these beings that I'm in the presence of as they're expressing who they are and as they're expressing their opinions and their values. And I get the opportunity to either meet them and be in the conversation, the dance of the conversation with them, or I could fall into that traditional teenagers talking, acting up, or doing whatever people say about this very natural developmental time where they're asserting their autonomy and they're exploring their autonomy. And it's the fact that they're doing it with me is an honor because they feel safe. And
I think it's interesting that when you said, as you're observing your children interacting with your teenage children, you get to decide if you're going to interact with them, if you're going to kind of just observe them from afar. I'm forgetting his name. You probably know this, but the founder of Moth Storytelling Festival, he's known for having said that story is fundamentally about making a decision, right? When we get to a fork in the road, that's when it becomes story. Or when we get to the top of the cliff, are we going to retreat or do we decide to leap? That's where story comes from. So I like how you just pose that nice visual about, as you're interacting with your kids, making these choices. So that's really helpful way of thinking about COVID-19 and story and narrative. So thanks for that.
Yeah.
So Adrienne,
thank you for letting me be able to reflect on this and then articulate it, because it's been really magnificent. It's been a real privilege to be a mom during this time.
Oh, that's awesome. So Adrienne, another question I have for you is, who, living or dead, do you consider to be a wonder mentor for you? And then my next question is, who do you consider, living or dead, to be a rigor mentor for you? And so for some people it kind of merges, but if it does, cool, but a wonder mentor for you.
I love that you asked that question, because I was thinking about this, and my wonder mentors are my ancestors. As an African-American woman, my life that I'm living right now is the direct result of the wonder of my ancestors.
That's an amazing answer. I love that. Yeah.
I mean, they enslaved Africans. Think about that. I am the descendant of enslaved Africans who were brought to this country, a new place, a new land, not familiar with the foliage, not familiar with the landscape, not familiar with the language, not familiar with the climate, none of this. It was all new. And they were enslaved, and they experienced a level of brutality that I think we're only just now starting to confront as a culture.
The trauma, right? The epigenetic effects.
Oh my gosh. And part of what inspired me to tell as you know, I've been working on a creation myth, an American creation myth, right? And my ancestors have been the inspiration for that, especially because I'm raising children and I want them to have a narrative of the American experience and the contribution that African Americans have had to the American experience, and to be proud of that. And to be the descendant of people who have observed the darkest hours and the darkest experience of what humans can do, and to still dream and to still have faith that it's not always going to be like that. And I stand here talking to you as a function of that wonder.
That's amazing.
And I find it deeply moving.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as I'm, my follow-up question is, who do you consider in your life to be rigor mentors? I could think that it might be the same answer. How do you interpret that question?
Well, I mean, yes, right? It's, again, my ancestors, and just 400 years of faith, 400 years of doing the work. And sure, we all have the examples of the greats who have led movements, but there were all those people behind those people who were leading those movements, right? And it was ordinary people who would get up every morning and raise their families and find joy. It was ordinary people, my ancestors, that did what they had to do to make a way no matter what, so that my father, who is the son of a deaf woman.
I did not know that.
Yeah, my grandmother was deaf, and she was an entrepreneur. She was a hairdresser, and she was able to send my father to Cornell Medical School. And many people contributed, but a Black man attending Cornell Medical School in the 60s. Think about that.
Yeah.
And the rigor that went into that, not just obviously my father to do that work, but all of the people who contributed to that.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say that's both, but then I would also say my heroine is Toni Morrison, right?
Mm-hmm.
So she is both. She is the combination of wonder and rigor, right?
Yes.
She, working in the literary field, said, there are stories that I am not reading, so I am going to write those stories.
Yeah.
And for me, as a cinematic storyteller, there are visual stories, cinematic stories that I was not seeing, that I wanted to tell. And that is what that was the catalyst for me to move from Philadelphia to Los Angeles to be a part of that conversation.
I love how embedded in your answers is this reminder that our teachers are everywhere, right? Our teachers are embedded in our memory. Our teachers are sometimes super aspirational and really far off, and also just part of us, part of our DNA. So thank you so much for those reflections. Is there anything else that you'd like to share as we come to a close?
I would like to repeat the quote that I read that has stood out to me, that I have in both of my children's room now. And that quote is, "We must be brave to follow the nudge in our hearts, that gnawing knowing that may not have any rational basis."
From my book. That's awesome. I thought it was from Toni Morrison.
Natalie
Oh,
Nixon.
thank you. Yeah, we must be brave. Absolutely.
Be brave.
Follow that intuition and that nudge. Thank you.
Thank you.